The subcommittee will come to order. Today, the Subcommittee for Surface Transportation, Maritime, Freight, and Ports will examine the roadway safety crisis and the solutions that we must implement in response. I would certainly like to thank my ranking member, Senator Young, as well as Chair Cantwell and Ranking Member Cruz for their help in convening this very important hearing. Every day, unfortunately, more than 100 Americans lose their lives on our roads. If trends continue, we expect more than 40,000 fatalities this year and hundreds of thousands of serious injuries. That means thousands of families are going to be torn apart by preventable crashes. Those families deserve our recognition as we work to address this problem. And that's why I'd like to enter into the record statements made by victims' families who have written to this committee to urge for further action on roadway safety. And without objection, those letters will be entered into the record. I also dedicate today's discussion to them, as these families know all too well the safety situation on our roads constitutes a national crisis. In 2021, the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration estimated that the U.S. had the highest number of fatalities since 2005. Unfortunately, the trend has not significantly improved over the past 2 years. According to NHTSA's most recent estimates, roadway deaths remain elevated, with only a 3% reduction in 2023. These numbers do not reflect the harm done to our drivers and passengers, but also vulnerable pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists who continue to be disproportionately harmed on our roads. Also overrepresented in these tragedies are Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans, as well as Americans living in rural areas. We need a strong and comprehensive response, and today we'll discuss a holistic, safe systems approach to addressing the roadway safety crisis and how we can implement that approach all across our country. The safe systems approach ensures that all aspects of our roadways account for inevitable human error. It emphasizes building multiple layers of protection so that even when mistakes are made, death and injury are unlikely. This framework focuses on 5 key categories: safer people and behaviors, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, and improving the post-crash care. I believe emerging technologies are going to play an important role in this endeavor. New interventions, from digital infrastructure that improves crash response to predictive road maintenance and active traffic management, are absolutely essential to achieving safe system goals. That also includes the safe and accountable development, testing, and deployment of autonomous vehicles, which can help us reduce serious injuries and death on our roadways. I expect our witnesses today to discuss the principles and data behind the safe systems approach, as well as how we can better support communities implementing these solutions on the ground. We have already made important progress. Congress took one key step towards supporting roadway safety with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law in 2021. The law provides $5 billion in safe streets for all grants for local, regional, and tribal communities to prevent roadway deaths and injuries using a safe systems approach, and requires them to measure their success along the way. The bipartisan infrastructure law is also the first piece of legislation to establish requirements for complete street standards. These ensure that our roadways can safely accommodate all traffic. That includes vulnerable road users like pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, and people with disabilities, as well as the elderly. And finally, with the help of Michigander Rana Abbas Taylor, the bipartisan infrastructure law included the Honoring the Abbas Family Legacy to Terminate Drunk Driving Act, a requirement for the inclusion of impaired driving prevention technology in our vehicles. Today, we will learn more about the challenges and the opportunities these provisions are posing for communities on the ground. But the bipartisan infrastructure law was just the beginning. There's still so much more that we can and we must do in order to address this crisis. Our witnesses will also help us examine what solutions need to come next. I would like to thank each of you for being here today and for the expertise that you're going to share with this committee and for all you do each and every day to make our streets and our highways safer. Would now invite Ranking Member Young for any opening remarks that you have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today to discuss a topic of paramount importance, roadway safety in the United States. Today, I want to highlight our nation's alarming roadway fatality and crash statistics, discuss the significance of innovation in enhancing roadway safety, and call attention to the important role that tried and true infrastructure investments play in keeping our roads safe. Every year, thousands of lives are tragically cut short due to vehicle crashes. In 2023 alone, nearly 41,000 people lost their lives on American roads. This statistic is not just a number, it represents parents, children, friends, and colleagues whose absence leaves a void in their families and communities. Additionally, millions of crashes occur annually, leading to severe injuries and substantial economic losses. These staggering figures underscore the urgent need for innovative solutions to make our roads safer. If we all come together on a bipartisan basis to prioritize human lives over political and parochial interests, we can significantly leverage technology to create safer roadways for everyone. One of the most promising areas of technological innovation lies in the development of autonomous vehicles, which have the potential to revolutionize roadway safety. Unlike human drivers, autonomous vehicles do not get distracted, tired, or impaired. They can react to hazards more quickly and make split-second decisions based on vast amounts of data that no human could process. Widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles could reduce traffic fatalities by up to 90%, potentially saving tens of thousands of lives each year in the United States. This technology isn't just futuristic, it's a tangible solution that can transform how we think about road safety and massively reduce the number of deaths on our roads every year. However, the benefits of innovation extend beyond autonomous vehicles. Smart infrastructure is another critical component of a safer transportation ecosystem. Intelligent traffic signals, for example, can adjust in real time to traffic conditions, reducing congestion and minimizing the likelihood of accidents. Connected vehicle technology allows cars to communicate with each other and with infrastructure, providing drivers with real-time information about road conditions, hazards, and traffic patterns. This interconnected network can significantly enhance situational awareness and reduce the risk of collisions. Furthermore, public education and awareness campaigns are essential to ensuring that drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, and other road users can understand and embrace these new technologies. Public acceptance and trust are crucial for the successful integration of innovative solutions into our daily lives. Public awareness and education efforts are also vital to addressing certain long-standing roadway safety issues in a cost-effective way, not the least of which is one that any parent should be extremely concerned about, and that is school bus safety, specifically related to illegal school bus passings. School bus safety should be at the top of our list when it comes to roadway safety, and unfortunately, it hasn't received the attention it deserves. Estimates show that more than 43 million violations occur during every 180-day school year. My Stop for School Buses Act, which Chairman Peters co-led with me, was signed into law in 2021 and directed the Department of Transportation to review illegal passing laws and potential technological solutions, along with developing a public safety messaging campaign. But with all of these things said, public safety campaigns and technological innovation on their own are not enough. We must also focus on improving our roadway infrastructure to improve safety. This includes maintaining road quality and focused federal funding to leverage state, local, and private funding for infrastructure projects that will vastly improve roadway safety. Indiana is home to over 97,000 miles of public roadways, and as the crossroads of America, Hoosiers rely heavily on transportation infrastructure. In Evansville, Indiana, I've been working hard for years to secure federal funding for the I-69 Ohio River Crossing project to fill a crucial gap in the nation's transportation infrastructure as it links I-69 between Indiana and Kentucky over the Ohio River. This type of project, which will mitigate traffic congestion, improve overall roadway safety, and significantly leverage non-federal dollars, is where federal infrastructure dollars should be focused. While the statistics on roadway fatalities and crashes are alarming, they also serve a powerful motivator for change. By embracing technological innovation and investing in our infrastructure, we have the opportunity to significantly improve roadway safety in the United States. Autonomous vehicles, smart infrastructure, and hard infrastructure investments hold immense potential to save lives and prevent injuries. So let us commit to supporting an all-of-the-above approach to advancing roadway safety innovations, working together to create safer roads for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Young. We're also joined by the Ranking Member of the full committee, Senator Cruz. You're recognized for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, 40,990 people died on roads in the United States. I expect that we will hear that number multiple times today, and that's because it's a tragic number, especially for all of those who lost loved ones. There are many reasons that go into this, one of which is lack of adequate infrastructure, lack of sufficient freeways, lack of sufficient space that creates more traffic. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has consistently failed to prioritize new freeways, has consistently failed to prioritize infrastructure, and instead, the Biden administration has allowed itself to be distracted by political pet projects, things like bike lanes, and things like the allegation that there are racist roads we need to be worried about, instead of focusing on the important task of building more damn roads. On this committee, I'm proud to have led the way on multiple pieces of bipartisan legislation that have been signed into law to expand our critical infrastructure. I-14, a new interstate that will run from the Permian Basin in Texas east all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. That legislation I introduced with Raphael Warnock, a Democrat who serves on this committee, and Cruz Warnock, passed unanimously and was signed into law. That interstate is critically needed throughout West Texas, East Texas, and each of the states that I-14 will run through all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Likewise, I was the lead author of legislation designating I-27, the Ports to Plains corridor. That bill was introduced with Ben Ray Lujan, another Democrat, another member of this committee. I-27 will run from Laredo, Texas, up north through West Texas, up through the panhandle of Texas, up into New Mexico, ultimately all the way up to Canada. It will be a major artery for north-south trade and commerce, just like I-14 will be a major artery for east-west trade and commerce. Likewise, I was the lead author of legislation to build and expand 4 new bridges from South Texas to Mexico across the Rio Grande River. Those bridges were being delayed by bureaucratic roadblocks put up by the Biden administration. Repeatedly, I went to the Secretary of Transportation, to the Secretary of State, asked them to stop those bureaucratic roadblocks. They refused to do so. Every one of those projects was delayed 3, 4, 5 years until I authored legislation streamlining the permitting of that legislation, of those bridges. That legislation was signed into law in December of last year, and the result will produce tens of thousands of high-paying jobs in Texas and billions of dollars of additional trade and commerce between Texas and Mexico. Infrastructure is one critical way to protect safety. Another way is public safety. And sadly, we have seen Democrats spend much of the past few years disparaging law enforcement, and we're learning that less enforcement of traffic safety potentially leads to more traffic crashes. That makes sense. If you think the police are not going to enforce laws, then people are going to be more likely to break the laws. In his written testimony for today's hearing, Mr. Nelson notes that, quote, rising traffic fatalities are correlated with drops in the enforcement of life-saving traffic safety laws, and that parts of the country have seen a decrease in citations by as much as 50% for dangerous activities like speeding or impaired driving. An article from October 2023 titled, quote, "The decline in police traffic stops is killing people," points out that cities like Seattle, New York City, and St. Louis saw traffic stops decline and saw a significant increase in traffic fatalities. Previous research has also drawn a link between declines in traffic enforcement and accidents. Another notable issue is drugged driving. A 2022 research paper found that from 2009 to 2019, legalization of recreational marijuana was, quote, associated with a 6.5% increase in injury crash rates and a 2.3% increase in fatal crash rates. And yet the Biden administration, rather than working to keep our families safe on the roadways, has instead decreed that it will reclassify marijuana from a Schedule I substance to Schedule III. The American Trucking Association quickly followed this news with a letter highlighting that rescheduling marijuana without an explicit allowance for a test for its use would create confusion and result in, quote, serious safety impacts to safety-sensitive industries. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses on each of these topics.
Our first witness is Sam Krassenstein. Sam Krassenstein serves as the Chief of Infrastructure for the City of Detroit under Mayor Mike Duggan. He is responsible for leading the city's infrastructure and transportation priorities, collaborating with state and federal partners, executing major projects, and overseeing grant funding. He has an MBA and a Master's in Urban Planning from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Krassenstein. Mr. Krassenstein, please proceed with your opening comments.
Good afternoon. Chair Cantwell, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Young, and Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the Senate Subcommittee. I am humbled at the opportunity to appear today at this important hearing to represent the City of Detroit and the State of Michigan as a transportation official, proud Detroit resident, motorcyclist, husband, and father. I'm here because Detroit has the unenviable position of having the second highest traffic fatality rate and the third highest rate for pedestrians in the country. Last year alone, we lost 132 lives to traffic violence amidst the 40,990 people killed nationwide. Our street network was built for a city of nearly 2 million people, almost 3 times our current population. Like many urban areas nationwide, overbuilt streets creates the perfect scenario for speeding, dangerous driving, and treacherous conditions for our most vulnerable residents trying to catch the bus or cross the street on foot. With the passage of the IIJA, we had an opportunity to make real change on these overbuilt streets with new programs like Safe Streets for All. We've been extremely fortunate to receive 2 grants through SS4A totaling $49.6 million across 2022 and 2023. The first grant allows us to make systematic infrastructure improvements across 30 miles of city jurisdiction roads on our high injury network, basically the roads with the highest rate of crashes resulting in injuries. The second grant focuses on high crash intersections near transit stops where data shows most of our pedestrians are getting hit. Many of these intersections are under either partially or fully under county or state jurisdiction and required close collaboration with our partners to even be able to apply. Last week, in partnership with Michigan DOT, we submitted another SS4A request, this time for a pilot for safety countermeasures on our most dangerous roadway, Gratiot Avenue. Gratiot, at least the part within Detroit, is one of the most dangerous roadways in the state for drivers and pedestrians alike. Gratiot is the perfect example of the road safety challenges that City of Detroit and other cities across the country face. It's a 9-lane surface arterial street that cuts through the heart of Detroit's east side, not far from where I live. The road design has been virtually unchanged since 1956 when streetcars stopped running in the city. While the posted speed is 30 miles an hour, the actual speeds are likely closer to 60. I say likely because we're discouraged from completing a speed study, as state law would require the speed limit to then be updated to the 85th percentile of prevailing speeds, which is not exactly in the name of safety. Since 2017, this 8-mile stretch of road has had 159 pedestrian or cyclist-involved crashes, 45 fatalities, and nearly 1,200 injury crashes. These aren't the result of drunk drivers or people texting, but rather the result of a road that no longer meets the needs of the population that it claims to serve. While Gratiot is also one of the busiest bus transit corridors in the state, there are multiple sections of the road that don't have as much as a marked crosswalk for at least half a mile, which may not seem like a lot, but when someone gets off the bus after a long day at work and needs to get to their house in the neighborhood on the other side of the street, we're asking them to walk more than a mile to avoid crossing 100 feet at an unprotected location. 100 feet is wider than some sections of 395. Unsurprisingly, people don't do this and take their lives into their hands on a daily basis. The data on Gratiot reflects this, with 33 pedestrian fatalities or serious injuries occurring at these unsignalized and unmarked crossings. In spite of all this, there's little that the city can do without our state DOT since it's their road. For years, we've been working with our state DOT to figure out a plan for roads like Gratiot, only to be given outdated vehicle-centric design criteria, maintenance obligations that would be placed on the city, and lack of funding as obstacles preventing us from addressing the sobering number of crashes, injuries, and fatalities. While the SS Fray program has created an opportunity for cities to seek funding to address safety challenges on larger TR corridors like Gratiot, its success is dependent on not just having the funding available, but also having the continued cooperation of state DOTs and county road agencies that historically have done little to prioritize safety or funding in urban areas and have little incentive from the federal government to do so. However, there's more that you can do to change this. The IIJA and the updates to the MUTCD, or the Manual for Uniform on Traffic Control Devices, basically the Bible for traffic design, if you're unfamiliar with the acronym, are a welcome start, and the pending Complete Streets and Building Safer Streets legislation have the potential to provide tremendous value to local governments, making it easier to add safety elements to projects. As I close today, I request you to consider how many lives can be saved by funding programs like Safe Streets for All. As we all seek to reduce fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways, it's critical to have dedicated safety funding that does not have to compete with maintaining roads and bridges. We've gotten used to not treating streets as public spaces, but only as ways to move traffic. If 40,990 people were killed annually in any other setting, there would rightfully be public outrage and a demand for immediate change. We have normalized the traffic violence that we see on our streets as accidents that just happen rather than crashes that can be avoided. As stewards of this space, we have a responsibility at all levels to change that and make these spaces safer for the people that use them. I appreciate the work of this subcommittee and the committee as a whole on this important subject. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the City of Detroit and local governments across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krassenstein. Our second witness is Laura Chase, and she's president and CEO of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America. She also currently serves as an advisor on the United States Department of Transportation's Transforming Transportation Advisory Committee to help the department navigate how to incorporate advanced technology safety and responsibility into our transportation system. Ms. Chase, thank you for being here today. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Young, Full Committee Chairwoman Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this important topic of roadway safety. In addition to the roles that Chairman Peters just mentioned, I'm also a mother of 3 children, including 2 teenage drivers. So the topic of transportation safety is near to my heart. In every facet of my life, I see opportunities to make transportation safer. So kids going to school, parents returning home, and a routine trip to the grocery store doesn't end in tragedy. ITS America is a nonprofit association which for over 30 years has been at the forefront of bringing together government, industry, and research to advance our vision of a better future transformed by technology and innovation, one that is safer, greener, and smarter for all. The status quo approach to addressing transportation safety is insufficient. Doing the same thing we have always done will yield only incremental results. It is clear we need a mindset shift to address the more than 40,000 transportation fatalities each year. We need to embrace a comprehensive, all of the above approach to improving safety on our roadways, which includes fully leveraging technology solutions that are available today. These solutions, including digital infrastructure, artificial intelligence, V2X communications, and automation, are not just nice to have. They are essential to improving safety and achieving our goals of Vision Zero. The U.S. spends billions of dollars every year on transportation and infrastructure, yet we don't see meaningful progress on lowering traffic fatalities. Of the $673 billion in spending in the IIJA, only $800 million was dedicated specifically for technology deployment, totaling around 0.1% of total infrastructure funding, even though technology investments can often provide more cost-effective solutions. Clearly, the amount of funding currently directed towards transportation technology is inadequate. The U.S. also needs to adopt a proactive approach to improving safety, rather than the often standard approach of reacting to tragic events that could have been prevented. To be proactive, we must move from focusing solely on physical assets, such as roads, bridges, guardrails, and speed bumps, to harnessing the power of innovation, data, and technology to improve safety. Fully deploying a layered approach of both physical and digital infrastructure assets is the way we will achieve Vision Zero. Technology provides the opportunity to proactively address safety in myriad ways at intersections, on highways, in congested urban environments, and in rural areas. Digital infrastructure and artificial intelligence can recognize and predict dangerous conditions that were previously unidentified, helping road users and transportation agencies address these situations ahead of time. V2X communications provides drivers and other road users with more information about hazardous conditions around them or impending collisions and key things beyond their line of sight, so that it gives them more time to react and make better decisions that improve safety. Automation is another proactive solution to enhance safety. ADAS technologies are already responding to driver action or inaction to correct vehicle positioning, brake for pedestrians, and more. Technology can also make static infrastructure dynamic, such as changing speed limits in the event of congestion or adverse weather, or extending traffic signals in real time when a pedestrian's in a crosswalk and needs more time. Technology can take us from a reactive system to a proactive system that addresses issues before they result in a death. The good news is we can do more today to integrate technology into our programs to ensure that these tools being developed right here in the U.S. are also deployed here at home to improve safety. This includes finalizing U.S. DOT's National V2X Deployment Plan to help advance this life-saving technology at speed and scale. It also includes prioritizing technology into the Safe Systems Approach, Complete Streets, the New Car Assessment Program, and other U.S. DOT policies and guidance, and prioritizing technology deployment under other discretionary grants, such as Safe Streets and Roads for All and RAISE. Congress also has an opportunity to reimagine the future of transportation technology when it reauthorizes surface transportation programs in 2026. This includes incorporating technology at every step in the process, from planning to construction to operations, and rethinking how we approach technology from policy to funding to procurement. Deployers need substantial and certain funding for technology that's incorporated at the beginning of a project's life cycle. We must also update our policies and best practices for procuring new kinds of technology and software. American innovation continues to lead the world. We have the opportunity to harness this innovation in the communities where we live, work, and play to realize better safety outcomes for all. As a mother, I long for the day when I don't have to say to my children, "Call me when you get there safely." We can make that day a reality faster by leveraging technology in a more holistic way. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Chase. Our third witness is Jake Nelson, who serves as the Traffic Safety Advocacy and Research Director at the American Automobile Association, probably better known as AAA. Mr. Nelson is an epidemiologist who applies research and the sciences of public health to AAA's public policy development, governmental advocacy, and consumer education activities. Mr. Nelson holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan, graduate degrees in public health and public policy from George Washington University and the University of Chicago. Mr. Nelson, welcome to the committee. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Peters and Ranking Member Young, for the opportunity to testify today. And the time I have today, I want to focus on a few key points from the more detailed testimony submitted for the record. Why the spike in highway deaths and what we can do about it. Here's what AAA research has uncovered about what's happening on our roadways and to whom. Since the pandemic, speeding, drunk driving, and non-use of safety belts account for most of the increase in traffic deaths. The post-COVID spike in fatalities has predominantly hit disadvantaged populations, particularly people with no education beyond high school and Black and Hispanic populations. Urban traffic deaths have increased by 66% since 2013, which has major implications for pedestrians and cyclists who are more concentrated in urban areas. Since 2013, pedestrian deaths have increased 81% in urban areas and dropped 10% in rural areas. This shift in traffic mortality has happened mostly on urban and suburban arterial roads. These are typically multi-lane, medium to high speed, and high volume roads, originally designed to quickly move vehicles in and out of cities. And today their use has changed. People live, work, and shop all along these roads. A note on enforcement. As you heard from Senator Cruz, traffic deaths have spiked in the US at the same time that citations for dangerous behaviors like speeding and drunk driving have dropped by as much as 50% in some parts of the nation. We know labor shortages across the profession and negative perceptions of law enforcement are factors here. And research is crystal clear that when perceived risk of apprehension for breaking laws drops, we see risk-taking behaviors go up. AAA survey research found that most drivers reduced their driving during the pandemic, but a small proportion increased their driving and appeared to be riskier than average, even after accounting for their age, their gender, and how much they drive. Nationally, drivers admit to engaging more regularly in behaviors like speeding, red light running, and driving within an hour of using cannabis. Most alarming was a 24% increase in self-reported drunk driving. The bottom line is that highly visible enforcement of traffic laws tied to things like speeding and impaired driving saves lives, period. If we enhance the trust between police and the communities they serve and protect, we stand a much better chance of police confidently enforcing life-saving laws with strong community support. What got us to this point will not move us closer to 0 deaths. My written testimony identifies 5 key recommendations to help move the needle, and I encourage the committee's consideration of all 5. I'm going to focus on 3. First, support for law enforcement. Congress can increase funding for states through Section 1906 Racial Profiling Prohibition Grant Program and establish a U.S. Center of Excellence for Equitable Traffic Enforcement. AAA believes a key limiting factor to state-level demand for existing funding is the lack of guidance and technical support available to them to properly standardize, analyze, and interpret traffic stop data, and also to effectively collaborate with law enforcement agencies to address inequities illuminated by these data without impeding non-driving related crime. We all benefit from making traffic enforcement more equitable, using police resources more efficiently, and maximizing road safety. Number 2, require better coordination between state and local governments when determining changes to maximum posted speed limits on higher speed state-owned roadways. AAA research shows that speeding-related crashes jump on surrounding roadways when speed limits are raised on nearby highways or highway segments. Stronger coordination would allow local road authorities to prepare for this spillover effect and protect pedestrians and bicyclists who are more concentrated near arterials and local roads. Number 3, stronger congressional oversight over HALT Act implementation. NHTSA will fail to issue a final rule by the congressionally mandated deadline, but Congress can ensure that NHTSA issues an NPRM by that same deadline, November 15th of this year. Once this tech penetrates the U.S. passenger vehicle fleet, it will save an estimated 10,000 lives annually, making it the single most effective safety countermeasure since the safety belt. AAA recognizes the challenges before you are not easy, but it's time to lean in on what's working and pursue opportunities to maximize the potential public good. That's how the U.S. can sprint instead of crawl towards saving lives on our nation's roadways. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Our 4th witness is Dr. Laura Sant. Dr. Sant is the co-director of the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. She also serves as co-director for the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center, as well as director of the Collaborative Science Center for Road Safety, whose mission is to advance transportation safety through a multidisciplinary, systems-based approach. Dr. Sant has a PhD in epidemiology from UNC Chapel Hill Gillings School of Global Public Health with a concentration in injury prevention. She also holds a master's in regional planning from UNC Chapel Hill with a concentration in transportation and land use. Dr. Sant, thank you for being here today. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Young, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Laura Sant, and I'm co-director of the Highway Safety Research Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. As an epidemiologist with a background in transportation planning, my guiding light is to improve the well-being of our communities through the prevention of roadway injuries and fatalities. It is tragic to see that the roadway fatality rate in the U.S. has been steadily increasing since 2010, moving in the opposite direction of other high-income nations. Traffic injuries now require millions of emergency department visits each year and create significant burdens for families, healthcare providers, employers, and the broader community. Our economy and our public health depend on our people and families arriving safely at their jobs and schools and returning safely to their homes and communities each day. Roadway crashes are preventable, and we have many available tools and practices that can be applied to improve safety. The Safe System approach is one such practice. It focuses on 5 key objectives: safer people, safer roads, safer vehicles, safer speeds, and post-crash care. Key to its effectiveness is that the Safe System approach places a clear focus on the primary mechanism of injury in roadway crashes: kinetic energy above human tolerance levels. Kinetic energy can seem like an abstract term, but everyone knows what excess kinetic energy looks like on our roads. We know it when we see pictures of vehicles torn in half from a T-bone crash. We know it when we see pedestrians literally knocked out of their shoes and thrown hundreds of feet from the site of impact. And we know a lot about how speed is playing a role in our road safety crisis. We know that the faster we drive, the more prone we become to making errors, and the more time and distance we need to respond to a hazard and avoid a crash. Most importantly, we know that higher speeds, in concert with larger vehicles, are a key factor behind the spike in fatalities that we are seeing among pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, and construction workers, whose bodies are simply not designed to withstand impact speeds above 20 miles per hour. Fortunately, research indicates that even relatively small changes in speed can improve safety for all road users significantly. Just a 5% reduction in average speed can cut the number of fatal crashes by 30%, making a significant step toward our goal of 0. We have many well-established treatments that can be applied to help naturally cue drivers to adopt context-appropriate speeds. Many states and local agencies have created ambitious speed management plans, and while progress is being made, there remains a critical need to build local capacity and political will to enhance cross-sector coordination, streamline delivery of speed management tools, and ensure that safe and appropriate speeds are inherently baked into our roadway design, operation, and maintenance practices. Opportunities also exist for vehicle designs and technologies to help us reduce the kinetic energy in our system. Features like intelligent speed adaptation are now becoming standard practices in other countries. We need to be ready and willing to apply global innovations to also save lives in the U.S. As we improve our safety plans and infrastructure and test out new technologies, we must further invest in modernizing our safety data systems. We can't manage what we don't measure, and we need data to be timely, accurate, consistent, accessible, and complete. We must enhance our data requirements and standards, put in place sustained funding and dedicated coordinating units, and establish clear performance metrics related to speed management to show accountability in our implementation of safe system efforts. As we adopt new technologies, we need better data related to usage, compliance, and failures to help us understand and improve their safety performance and public acceptance. We need a safer system in the U.S., one in which people can make mistakes and be human and still make it home on our roads. A focus on addressing kinetic energy as the root cause of roadway fatalities offers tremendous promise for creating a transportation system that is safe for people of all ages and abilities. University researchers are well positioned to support this work in collaboration with the many partners dedicated to community safety and well-being. Thank you for your time and leadership, and I welcome the discussion on these critical issues.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sant. Our fifth witness is Jeff Farah, Chief Executive Officer of the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. The association represents more than 20 of the leading companies developing autonomous vehicle technologies. Mr. Farah, good to have you at the committee here. You may proceed with your opening remarks.
Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Young, members of the subcommittee, it is an honor to testify today, particularly as a former staffer for the Senate Commerce Committee. My written testimony provides detail on the unacceptable number of fatalities and injuries on U.S. roads. I want to spend my time this afternoon talking about solutions, and specifically how autonomous technology can help address our nation's roadway safety crisis. What was once an aspiration for our country is now a reality. Today, autonomous vehicles are here, and AVIA reported last month that our members have driven nearly 70 million autonomous miles on U.S. public roads. That is equivalent to 293 round trips to the moon. Autonomous vehicles can play an important role in addressing roadway safety. Our country has hit a wall in reducing roadway deaths, and it is a wall built on human behavior, like speeding and impaired or distracted driving. These human errors are the overwhelming cause of the more than 40,000 deaths on our roads, but fortunately, AVs do not engage in any of these behaviors. It is essential to define what we are referring to when we say autonomous vehicles. These are not vehicles using driver assist features that we increasingly see rolled out on our roads. With driver assist technology, the human driver must constantly be engaged to take over at a moment's notice. With truly autonomous vehicles, the human has no responsibility for the driving task. Autonomous driving is a marriage between hardware and software and delivers sensitivities, capabilities, and reaction times well beyond that of a human driver. The sensors on an AV give the vehicle a 360-degree view to detect, track, and react to objects and people even when hidden from human perception due to other vehicles, buildings, and obstructions. Particularly relevant to this hearing is how AVs are specifically developed to detect vulnerable road users, such as motorcycles, pedestrians, cyclists, and construction workers, and then safely respond to their unique behavior. We have all been in situations where a pedestrian steps off a curb and was not visible due to a parked car, or a motorcycle was lane splitting and approached from behind and was undetected until a split second before the motorcycle went by. Now imagine a world where vehicles do not have human limitations because they can see through objects and a few hundred meters in every direction, including beyond the vehicle's headlights. This is the promise of autonomous vehicles to America's vulnerable road users. The AV industry recognizes this is a new technology to most Americans, and we are strongly committed to building public trust in AVs. We believe that public trust in AVs is essential to their acceptance, and that public trust must be earned and maintained by the industry. To achieve that objective, last month, AVIA announced its trust principles. Through this initiative, AVIA is articulating the importance of transparent interactions with government officials and the public, deep engagement with law enforcement and first responders, and upholding the highest cybersecurity and privacy standards. Autonomous vehicles are very much an American success story, and our country can and must lead on this area globally, but we need the support of policymakers. I want to turn to a couple of policy recommendations that will help industry address the roadway safety crisis. Federal leadership on AVs is imperative. Competitor countries are moving forward with policy frameworks, and states are increasingly taking the lead on AV policy. 25 U.S. states now have AV deployment statutes and are welcoming the technology. I encourage federal action in a couple of areas. First, Congress should act on federal legislation like the AV START Act from Senators Peters and Thune. Our industry is incredibly grateful to both senators for their long-standing leadership on AV policy and their recognition that the technology will help make our roads safer. Our organization was especially excited to see AV specifically called out by the bipartisan Senate AI working group that is led by Senators Schumer, Rounds, Heinrich, and Young. The working group encouraged committee action on a federal framework for the testing and deployment of AVs across all modes of transportation and noted that this is particularly important as strategic competitors, like the Chinese Communist Party, are acting. Second, the AV industry has appreciated strong interest from the Department of Transportation on how AVs can increase safety on American roads. But we need action from DOT in key areas. For example, NHTSA should issue a proposed rule on its AV STEP program, which was first announced in July 2023. AVs present an opportunity to reimagine how vehicles are designed and promote safety and accessibility. According to NHTSA, AV STEP will encourage deployment of next-generation vehicles and open up a wealth of data to help make progress towards establishing an effective governance structure for autonomous technology. Another example where DOT should take immediate action is by FMCSA granting the still-pending industry exemption request that will allow AV trucks to use alternative warning devices to signal when a vehicle is stopped on the roadside. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. Mr. Krassenstein, I want to thank you again for being here, and also thank you for all the great work that you're doing in the city of Detroit. But as you mentioned in your opening comments, unfortunately, Detroit has historically struggled with high numbers of roadway injuries and deaths, especially among the Black community. So my question for you, sir, is can you speak to the importance of Safe Streets for All funding in the city of Detroit in terms of enabling various safety interventions that would otherwise not simply be possible? And two, can you speak to how Detroit is addressing some of the socioeconomic and racial disparities in roadway safety using this grant program?
Thank you for that question, Chairman. So for the first part of the question on the importance of the Safe Streets for All program, the program is vitally important for cities like Detroit, where within the city limits, we have 3,100 linear miles of road, some of which are under our jurisdiction, but many of our larger roads, our most dangerous roads, are not. The Safe Streets for All program gives us a dedicated funding stream that we don't need to worry about making the hard choices between state of good repair and saving lives on safety projects. This gives us the opportunity to have dedicated funding to just focus on safety on streets that have been overbuilt in Detroit and, frankly, have had way too many crashes, injuries, and fatalities. To the second part of your question, Chairman, on how we're addressing socioeconomic factors into this, that's frequent in all the work that we do on everything from which roads that we pave to where we do safety projects and handle interventions. We're proud to be taking a very equity-based approach across both our public works teams and our planning and development teams and how we engage neighborhood groups, looking at commercial corridors and looking at the data as well. So we do try to take a very balanced approach with where we make those types of investments throughout the city.
Right, thank you. Ms. Chase, in addition to serving as chair of this subcommittee, I'm also the founder and chair of the Senate Motorcycle Caucus. I'm an avid motorcyclist myself and share that with a number of my colleagues here. May is also Motorcycle Safety Month, where we raise awareness of motorcycle fatalities. Motorcyclists unfortunately perish on our roads at a rate 22 times the rate of motor vehicle occupants. So my question for you is, what sort of technology interventions are most likely to benefit motorcyclists as well as other vulnerable road users, and how can we get those up and running as quickly as possible?
Thank you for the question, Chairman. Probably the most effective safety technology would be vehicle-to-everything technologies, V2X technologies for motorcyclists. These technologies, as you know, provide situational awareness to both drivers of cars, motorcyclists, and other road users to alert them, the drivers or the users of the vehicles, of impending collisions or hazards that go beyond their line of sight so that the drivers can make better decisions, avoid a crash, and improve safety on the roads. And this is really critical when you're talking about motorcyclists or other road users, who do not have the protection of a vehicle. So I would say vehicle-to-everything technologies would be the top technology solution. There are also technology solutions being developed by BMW and Bosch, who are very active in the motorcycle safety space with what we call networked VDEX and digital alerting. So alerting of maybe other key information about the roadway conditions or weather, things that wouldn't essentially be a safety of life issue, but could be really critical information to a motorcyclist or a cyclist. And so those solutions are being developed by those companies. And in addition, the American Motorcyclists Association was a part and has been a part of a larger VDEX coalition for many years now, supporting scale deployment of these technologies so that we can, in fact, protect not only drivers, but also motorcyclists, bicyclists, and other vulnerable road users using our system.
Great, thank you. Mr. Farrow, as you know, I strongly believe and support AVs and I believe that they can play a major role in achieving our goals of preventing roadway fatalities, and I appreciate you mentioning the bill that I'm working on with Senator Thune. But in order for that to be the case, self-driving vehicles and their developers need to gain and keep public trust, as you mentioned, on the acceptance and ensure that there's also a transition for affected workers with this new technology. The committee is in receipt of some letters from unions representing workers who work in and around vehicles that share their priorities and concerns with self-driving cars. Without objection, I will be entering those into the record. But Mr. Farrow, how are you and your members working with transportation workers, affected communities and the public to build trust and transparency. And what do you think the best approach is to dealing with this challenge as this industry continues to develop? And unfortunately, incidents will inevitably occur, but and something you need to be thinking about.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. I appreciate, again, your leadership. As I mentioned in my opening statement, a recent industry initiative of AVIA was the release of our trust principles. And one of the things that really comes through in that document is that we are articulating our very strong belief that we need to have an incredible amount of local engagement. This means prior to companies going into cities, speaking with local leaders, with law enforcement, with with first responders, with leaders, whether in labor and other walks of life. It's very important that we be meeting people where they are, explaining what our intentions are, how it is that we can increase safety, how it is that we can help with supply chain challenges, how we can assist, especially city leaders, with accessibility opportunities and whatnot. And so this very, very localized operation is something that we're very proud of, and it's something that the industry has devoted a significant amount of resources toward.
Well, thank you. We're in the process of voting right now, so I am going to go vote real quickly. I'm going to hand the chair over to the gavel to the ranking member, and I'll go vote and be back to relieve you.
Great. Works for me. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Farah, thank you for that reply, and thank you also for mentioning the AI roadmap that Senators Rounds, myself, Heinrich, and Schumer released last week. In that bipartisan roadmap, we encourage committees to continue their work on developing a federal framework for testing and deployment of autonomous vehicles, and we highlight that it's particularly critical as our strategic competitors, most notably the Chinese Communist Party, continue to race ahead and attempt to shape the vision of this technology. Just yesterday, in fact, the UK, their AV Act became law, and they'll have driverless cars on their roads within 2 years, says current reporting. So, Mr. Farah, where does the U.S. stand in the global AV competition, to your mind? And what are other countries doing differently in support of innovation and deployment?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. The way I think about this is that over the course of the last dozen or so years, you've had an incredible American success story in terms of bringing autonomous driving to where it is. But the reality is that this has gone noticed by many other countries around the world that also want to have safer roads, they want to have more accessibility, they want to have supply chain benefits. And so they are racing to keep up, and certainly China is one of those countries. And while our country right now, we are firmly in the lead, we have the best companies in the world, we have the deepest capital markets, we're ahead in technological innovation, we are struggling when it comes to public policy. We need to have a federal framework put in place that supports the development of autonomous vehicles. We need to have action on legislation such as AV Start. We need to have action on rules at the Department of Transportation. The federal government is behind where a lot of the states are, where they have really taken a lot of action in recent years.
Well, it's incumbent upon us to listen to these entreaties and to act after, duly studying the facts and consulting with all stakeholders. And we have been involved in such consultation and preparing for action for some period of time. So it does seem like if the UK is prepared to go ahead, it seems like we ought to be, especially seeing as we're leading in innovating in many of these technology areas. Is that consistent with your assessment of where the technology is?
Senator, yeah, we absolutely have the best companies in the world here, but we need to make sure we have a policy framework that can support those companies going forward.
Mr. Farah, to move on to another important topic that many of you touched on in your opening remarks, and I'll get to many of you. Nearly 41,000 people died on our roads last year. It's just a massive, massive number, and I was trying to contextualize this number because I believe this goes underreported, at least as compared to a lot of other sort of disasters that afflict families and communities. The CDC reports that every year the number of U.S. murders involving a firearm, it's half that number. It's half that number. So I actually think it was completely accurate when Secretary Buttigieg recently said, human drivers aren't just problematic, they're murderous. Again, he was talking about the opportunity cost for not adopting the latest technologies. They're murderous, and we've been bathed in this level of carnage all our lives. He put it more pointedly, more graphically than I think I would, but nonetheless, can you tell us, Mr. Farah, how AVs will help decrease the number of fatalities and share any projections on how significantly it will decrease by your estimates?
Senator, I appreciate the question. I think the reality is that we've been desensitized to this as a country, and it's not acceptable. It's going to take committee hearings like this. It's going to take action at a federal and a state level to be able to address this. For our part in the industry, the development of autonomous vehicles, we believe, is going to be one of the suite of solutions that is out there. The reality is that human behavior is what's driving a lot of the deaths and other types of crashes that we are seeing. And autonomous vehicles don't suffer from a lot of those human frailties. They don't text while drive, they don't drive impaired, they don't drive distracted, and we don't have to accept any longer all of these types of human conditions that are there. And so we will continue to see autonomous vehicles roll out deliberately in American communities. That is great news, and our expectation is that correspondingly we'll see a reduction in crashes, and that's something, again, we need federal partners on.
Yeah. We certainly have we've got to lay a predicate of trust in order to enable that to happen. I absolutely understand that. I'm going to recognize Senator Klobuchar, and we'll get back to our other witnesses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you. It is wonderful to be here with all of you, and I think, you know, I've cared a lot about this issue for quite a while, starting out with when I was a prosecutor on DWIs, and we had to change our law in Minnesota for repeat felons driving with repeat DWIs. We actually had a guy that had, I think, 17 DWIs, and he told the officer he moved to Minnesota because we didn't have enhanced penalties when Colorado did. That was good evidence for me. But then when I got here, I started doing a lot of work on distracted driving. And our transportation system in Minnesota is consistently one of the best in the country, I think number 4 for transportation infrastructure, yet we still have so many fatalities due to driving. And Mr. Chase, in your testimony, you note how in 2021, Ms. Chase, how in 2021 rural communities had a fatality rate 1.5 times higher than the urban rate. Can you speak to how infrastructure investments in rural areas like broadband can improve safety in our transportation system?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yes, rural communities do face the brunt of traffic fatalities. We have seen there are significant positive impacts from technologies like ADAS systems, in particular lane keep, which in Iowa, lane departure is one of the leading causes of crashes in rural areas. So these advanced driver assist systems, level 2 partial automation, to assist drivers staying in their lane, not crossing the median strip, is actually a critical safety intervention. In addition, in the physical world, you know, many of the rural states do put rumble strips, right, to help drivers understand, right, with a haptic response when they might be drifting from the lane. And then with regard to broadband, communications really is the backbone of transportation in the 21st century. It will continue to become even more important as we move forward and incorporate more advanced technologies into our system. And really, at its base level, what it allows us to do is to transmit and share critical information in various different ways to road users. And that is key. And we need to be investing in that backbone of broadband and the communications infrastructure as part of our transportation programs and funding.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Farah, what I was referencing before on distracted driving, it takes just 5 seconds to drive across an entire football field. I say with my friend here, Senator Young, he and I are both, we once competed on a Vikings Indianapolis game. I remember, I think the Vikings had the biggest comeback in the history of the NFL, but it happened. Okay, so, but almost as good as the Timberwolves against Colorado this week. But the football field, so to get more serious here, 5 seconds to drive across a football field at 55 miles per hour, 5 seconds. In 2022, when you think about people who are looking at their phone, looking away, in 2022, over 3,300 people died in accidents involving distracted drivers. 19-year-old Shreya Dixit from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, tragically died in 2007. Her dad is a huge advocate, as you know, on this stuff, when the driver of the car she was riding in reached to grab something in a backseat. And this happens over and over and again. And your testimony notes how almost 3% of all drivers are looking at or using their handheld device. In your view, how important can new technologies be for combating distracted driving?
Senator, thank you very much for sharing the information you just did. It's obviously tragic, and it's something that's happening nationwide, and it's happening every single day. I think distracted driving is a huge national problem. This is something that our expectation is with autonomous vehicles that we can very much help to address that, because the reality is that the autonomous driving system does not get distracted, and you don't have to have this situation now where for many people the temptation is too great to look at their phone at that traffic light or to look at it when they're going at a certain speed, and then we all know what ends up happening. And so this is something where we're trying to fundamentally remove that human error, that distraction that is persistent across our country. We're trying to remove that from the equation and allow technology to help to drive down those deaths.
While at the same time enforcing the laws we have on the books, I will add, because not everyone's going to be doing that. And so it's just, it is really a balance. And it to me, that you've got to do both things. We've tried to put a lot of incentives in place for getting laws passed to help on distracted driving, and going way back to Secretary LaHood, actually. So thank you very much for your work. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I'll recognize Senator Capito now.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you all for being here. And I didn't get to hear all the testimony, but I did get to hear quite a bit. I had some other questions, but here's the one thing that I haven't heard. I haven't heard one person mention the increased weight of an electric vehicle. The president has said that by 2030, we are going to have 50% of our cars are going to be electric vehicles. So I just did some brief stuff on my phone here. A GMC Hummer EV weighs 9,000 pounds. The battery itself weighs 2,900 pounds. A gas GMC Sierra, which is, I guess, comparable to a Hummer, if anything's comparable to a Hummer, weighs 6,000 pounds. There's a study out there that says baseline fatality possibility increases 47% for every 1,000 pounds added to a car. So we can't regulate or we can't legislate if we reach these goals, which are doubtful, but going in that direction. If we're looking at heavier vehicles, I mean, this has been brought to my attention by our own West Virginia DOT. Can the guardrails withstand the impacts? Dr. Zant said that when you talked about fatalities, it's mass versus velocity. People aren't slowing down, and if you've been in an electric car, those things get up and go pretty daggone fast. What are we going to do about this? And does anybody have suggestions? And I'll just start with Ms. Chase.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do think it is a question that we have to address collectively as we move forward. At ITS America, our North Star is safety. And while we appreciate the significant climate impacts of transportation, and we understand that we need to move to a more sustainable transportation system, we need to be prioritizing safety. As I mentioned in my opening remarks and my written testimony, we believe we need to move to a more proactive approach. And to me, part of that means preventing crashes before they even happen, as opposed to mitigating the impact. Obviously, we need to do both, but if we take an approach that is proactive to prevent the crash from happening, that is where ITS America believes we can leverage our technology tools in the best possible way.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you for the question, Senator. At AAA, we support consumer choice on what kind of vehicle people choose to drive.
I'm not really debating EVs versus
Understood.
gas. I'm saying
Yep.
these are heavier vehicles that are going to result in more fatalities, and we're talking about safety.
Understood, but you're speaking our language because we've been giving a lot of thought to the potential safety implications of proliferating passenger vehicle fleet involving EVs. And you highlighted issues about stopping distance, how quickly these vehicles can reach higher speeds, potential degradation of the built infrastructure. Just think of a parking garage full of EVs.
Right, well, the collapse in New York City, yeah.
Right, and then just size and weight issues of an
I'm
ICE
not
vehicle.
hearing any solutions here to how we're going to.
Well, I don't think we have solutions yet because we don't have a high penetration of EVs in the U.S. fleet, but certainly we should be approaching this as a first do no harm kind of a policy move. And we haven't seen at AAA much effort into thinking through how to proactively address these implications on our infrastructure, but also on safety. We've seen no action.
I mean, I just think it would be smart to be talking about this right now in terms of these types of vehicles, because if any of the goals are actually met, this is going to be a large part of our fleet. Doctor, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Yes, as I've spoken about in my earlier remarks, kinetic energy is a product of mass times velocity squared. And so the mass is a critical factor, but also the speed at which these vehicles can travel. And so a lot of the tools we have in our existing tool belt are really to address the speed side of the equation. We have, with all of our infrastructure investment, opportunities for a lot of the built environment to address speed management, to create safe and appropriate speeds for different vehicle types in different contexts. We also have some technologies on the vehicular side as well, related to intelligent speed assistance and intelligent speed supportive devices.
So I'm not being confrontational here, I'm just clarifying on myself. So that means you would have governors in your specific vehicle that wouldn't let you go a certain mileage or a certain speed. I mean, I know there have been bills out there that say trucks shouldn't go more than what the semis shouldn't go more than 70 miles per hour if that's the posted speed limit. Is that what you're talking about there when you talk about technology?
There are technologies that exist on large truck fleets, yes, but also what we're seeing in other countries is intelligent speed adaptation systems. So they can provide.
What does that mean?
They can provide warnings to drivers when they're over the speed, or they can actually address the pressure that needs to be applied to accelerate a vehicle to give sort of a physical feedback to the driver so that they don't continue to accelerate over the rate of the posted speed.
So they're doing that now in Europe?
They are.
Okay. And Mr. AV over there, I mean, West Virginia has a great AV law that we passed, but I wonder what you see the future, and I might be out of time, so I actually am. Thank you. Because we have a vote, I better go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Fisher, recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Capito, I have an answer to your question.
Oh, good.
You were asking, has there been any testing that's gone on about accidents and the safety there? Well, last year, the University of Nebraska conducted a first-of-its-kind crash assessment. They crashed an all-electric pickup truck against a standard highway guardrail to investigate the efficacy of current safety measures in light of the increased presence of heavier EVs. During the test, this EV plowed through the guardrail and traveled into the opposite lane of traffic. In January, a group of engineers warned that increasing EVs' weights combined with reduced structural design requirements will result in reduced infrastructure safety, especially for parking structures. So testing has been done. I assume there'll be more done in the future. You brought up also with trucks and the weight of trucks. Their batteries obviously are much, much heavier than 3,000 or 4,000 pounds. So yeah, there are a lot of research needs to be done there, right? Let's see, Ms. Chase. A recent NHTSA report found that 20% of the U.S. population lived in rural communities, and Senator Klobuchar addressed this about rural areas account for about 40% of all traffic fatalities. Nebraska, I'm sorry to say, holds the second highest ratio of rural to urban fatality rates in this country. You mentioned that rural areas have rumble bars. We do, on our highways in Nebraska, have a number of those on every highway. It helps. You mentioned technology. You mentioned some infrastructure changes, but in the near term, do you have any ideas on upgrades that we could see for infrastructure that maybe could have some big safety gains there? I mean, it's very, very concerning
Yeah,
when we see that continued growth in the percentage.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do think that rural areas, we know that they can benefit from vehicle-to-everything technologies. And this is technology that an agency, a state DOT or other public agency can deploy today. And there are grants available today through the infrastructure law to access these funds. But they can deploy these roadside units to be able to communicate with fleets and then other drivers if they're deployed in the vehicles. They can provide, curve speed warning alerts, right? If a vehicle is going too fast into a curve, weather warning alerts. We've seen great success in Wyoming using primarily weather warning alerts because it's the freight corridor there has such spot weather impacts and wind and a risk of semis tipping over. So those, and actually they have a lot of data that shows that there's been significant reduction in crashes. So I think that that's an important technology to be deploying and investing in today, understanding that some of the safety benefits will come, immediately, and more will come in the long term as this technology gets deployed more ubiquitously and scaled throughout the transportation system.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, I was interested to see that in your testimony, you said that rising traffic fatalities correlate with drops in the enforcement of life-saving traffic safety laws. And you noted that citations for DUIs and other types of dangerous driving have decreased by as much as 50% in some regions. I noticed that you attributed much of this to the staffing challenges that law enforcement agencies are facing right now. And I have a bill that I hope the President will be signing. It recently passed Senate and the House, and it addresses that staffing concern. It also contains a new GAO study to assess the law enforcement staffing crisis at departments nationwide. And this includes the impacts this issue is having on public safety. Do you believe that traffic fatalities should be among the public safety impacts that my bill, hopefully soon law, that study should evaluate? Is that something that once we get this signed, we can recommend that be included?
Absolutely, because I think we need to underscore the important role that law enforcement plays in enforcing proven life-saving laws. Research is crystal clear that when risk of perceived apprehension goes down, that risk-taking behaviors go up. And the International Association of Chiefs of Police did a survey of law enforcement agencies nationwide, confirming the concerns with staffing shortages and tied it to negative perceptions of law enforcement profession overall throughout the United States. And so, as I noted in my testimony, one of the ways that we can help address that is to offer more support to law enforcement through accessing better data, stop data, to increase transparency and to communicate to the communities that they serve and protect.
Could I have my staff reach out to you for information on that and some more ideas that we could hopefully help guide where the committee will be looking, that study will be going then?
Senator, we would love that.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. We'll start a second round. I know there are a couple other members on their way here, but Senator Young will need to vote, so he needs to ask questions now. I'll defer to Senator Young and
thanks to
receive
our
questions.
amazing witnesses. I've already learned a lot today. One of the things I'm struck by, Mr. Farah, when we talk about autonomous vehicles is just not only the ability to save lives year on year, but it's also the amazing impact that they could have on changing the quality of life on countless individuals who today rely on friends, family, and others to drive them around their communities. Mr. Farah, how will the development of AVs and their deployment impact the disabled, the blind, the elderly, and others that are unable to drive?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and we work very closely with a number of organizations that are in the spaces that you mentioned, because they're so interested in how AVs are going to be transformative for their communities. You mentioned the elderly. My grandmother's 94 years old. She hasn't driven in more than 10 years. She's completely reliant on, fortunately, the fact that she has sons and daughters that live locally that can take her to places and do those things. Many people are not fortunate to have those situations. They have lost the liberation that comes with being able to drive. This is something where you can re-deliver this to people that have had that be a fact of life. You also talked about the visually impaired. I think it's very important to note that you have massive amounts of underemployment and unemployment in the blind community because they're not able to get to as many occupations as many other Americans are able to do. And so you look at organizations like the National Federation of the Blind that looks with great excitement towards autonomous vehicles because this is an opportunity to be able to move around more freely, to be able to have, again, that independence that so many people take for granted.
Thank you. Ms. Chase, I'm going to turn to you in recognition of the fact that neither Congress nor the executive branch have provided regulatory standards for safely deploying autonomous vehicles. And I'd like to get your perspective on what impact the lack of a clear federal standard has on state and local governments.
Thank you for the question. So our state and local public agency members have expressed continued frustration with inaction from NHTSA in particular, because what it's done is it's transferred the risk and responsibility for assessing the safety systems of these autonomous vehicles to the state and the localities. And that is decidedly a federal role. And so there's great desire from the community, both public and private sector, for NHTSA to move forward with their AV safety framework, AV STEP, that was mentioned earlier.
Thank you. I'm going to turn for my final question to Dr. Sant, and it pertains to a type of infrastructure that's been around for generations. My dear mother lives in the town that is now known as the roundabout capital of the world, Carmel, Indiana. The city of Carmel, Indiana has installed roughly 150 roundabouts over the last 30 years. And while the city's population has quadrupled during that time, it's actually grown a lot more than that, but we're playing it safe. The conversion to roundabouts has resulted in a 47% reduction in injury crashes overall and a 90% reduction in traffic fatalities. Additionally, the annual average amount of time saved in 2020 was 5 days or 120 hours per motorist, as roundabouts provide for increased flow without stopping. Dr. Sant, can you talk about the safety benefits of roundabouts that not only improve roadway safety, but increase efficiency in our transportation network?
Thank you, Senator Young. Yes, it's fantastic to hear the success stories that you've had in Carmel, Indiana. I think roundabouts are one of a suite of success stories that we can claim with our speed management tools. With roundabouts, we see the research pointing to up to an 88% reduction in severe and fatal injury crashes. And the key to roundabouts is that they really do reduce conflict points at those intersections where injuries can be most severe. They reduce the approach speed so that we're managing that kinetic energy in our system. And as you said, they do reduce delay at intersections, and so they can have benefits beyond safety. But what's really fantastic about the roundabouts that we're seeing in the United States is that they have versatility of design in different contexts. So we've seen successes, for example, in school zones in Wisconsin. In Kansas DOT, they worked with their freight community to make roundabouts work for the trucking industry. And they really are a tool for safety and mobility. So thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor, for speaking to that question. And I tell the chairman, because I know he's captivated by my inquiries related to roundabouts, that you can access a 30-minute tutorial on roundabouts if you go to the Freakonomics episode, in which former Carmel Mayor Jim Brainerd talks at great length about the safety benefits, about the fuel benefits. They are cheaper to maintain. So we're preaching the gospel in Carmel, Indiana. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, very good. It sounds like must-see TV, so we'll be sure to tune in. Mr. Krassenstein and Mr. Nelson, I've got a question for both of you. If each of you could speak to potential improvements that you think we can make to the Safe Streets for All grant program to improve our community's ability to make the most of them. They've been out, but love to have your input as to how we can make them better. We'll start with you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you for the question, Senator. One of the benefits of the SS4A grant program is that it targets communities. And one of the benefits of that is that if we're really serious about driving the number of highway fatalities in the nation closer to zero, we need to follow the fatality data. And it's going to tell a story pretty quickly that it's predominantly in lower income, underserved communities. One of the benefits of bringing these kinds of funds to the local community is addressing the very population that is bearing the predominant brunt of the highway safety problem. One of the ways that we can improve the SS4A grant is by improving the requirements on states and localities to engage in public engagement and participation. And so this is more than just a listening session of local residents. It's more about making sure that they understand what the safety experience is in their community, that they understand what the various infrastructure countermeasure solutions are available to them and the considerations relative to each, and that their input about which of those countermeasures they would welcome most into the community, I think should be adopted and implemented into sort of the outcome of that project. It's how we are gonna build demand and support for these kinds of investments from the people who live in those communities, and we can foster more investment like this in the future.
Very good. Mr. Krassenstein?
Thank you for the question, Chairman. Well, to start, we are extremely supportive of the Safe Streets for All program and think that the current design for benefiting local governments is extremely important. So off the bat, we're very happy that the program exists. In terms of changes we would propose to make to the Safe Streets for All program going forward, a couple things come to mind. I think one of the big opportunities is how do we incentivize collaboration between cities and other road jurisdiction owners that may not be eligible to apply. So in my testimony, I talked a lot about the value of state DOTs and the larger roads that they own. Right now, state DOTs are not eligible to be able to participate in the Safe Streets for All program, and I think that's a good thing. But I think where we need to get really creative is, well, our state DOTs also own the most dangerous streets. So knowing that they're not eligible to apply and that there's still a match requirement where it's difficult for cities to justify spending its own dollars on someone else's roadway, I think we need to be really creative on how we address those larger arterial roads that right now fall outside of the purview of Safe Streets for All unless you're applying on behalf of another jurisdiction. The second area that I would look at is whether or not that there is, I would look carefully at the balance between implementation funding and the planning and demonstration project funding. I think both are incredibly valuable, but as more and more communities go forward and have safety action plans, I think it will be very important to have flexibility in how those planning and demonstration dollars can be spent to allow new safety countermeasures to be tried out, to be piloted before doing a full-scale project. So I think between two of those, I think there's opportunity to do a little fine tweaking to an otherwise overall great program.
Right, thank you. Dr. Sant, you are an epidemiologist by training, and in your testimony, you discussed taking a public health approach to roadway safety in order to improve outcomes. So if you could please describe exactly what you mean by a public health approach, and specifically when it comes to how we improve both data collection as well as education related to roadway safety.
Yes, thank you for that question. In public health, I think the approach is very compatible with what we've been talking about with the safe system approach. It means that we take a holistic and proactive approach to prevent and reduce the likelihood of risk of injury or any other negative health outcome. And another important parallel is that in public health, we follow what's known as the socio-ecological framework for much of our intervention development. And what that means is that we recognize that individual behaviors stem and often are influenced by a broader social environment and a broader environmental, physical environment. And so we can change human health and human behavior by recognizing the systems in which the people are operating and looking at those social and physical environments. And so by the safe system approach, taking that holistic view, it's very much aligned with the approach that public health practitioners use for other health issues. With respect to your question around data, we see that the public health community offers tremendous resources and knowledge around how we can improve our injury data systems. There's a lot of complementary data sources from our health data sets, including our trauma registries, our emergency department data, our EMS data, that can really supplement the data that we collect from our law enforcement officers. We also see really great examples of timeliness in data collection within the public health community and opportunities to link that data and really understand the nature of our risks. And with respect to the question about communications, public health does a fantastic job in many ways of engaging the community and having really strong messaging around health communications and health behaviors. And so that's a really great opportunity to coordinate and build partnerships with the transportation community as well.
Thank you. Senator Markey, you're recognized for your questions.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. We've heard a lot today about how technology can potentially make cars safer, but we don't just need safe cars. We need safe streets, not only for drivers, but for pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit riders. These road users are particularly vulnerable. Just look at the numbers. In 1994, 21% of people killed in motor vehicle accidents were outside the vehicle, 21%. In 2022, that number rose to 36% of those killed were outside the vehicle. Pedestrian death tolls tell a similar story. In 2011, 4,400 pedestrians were killed by motor vehicles. In 2022, that number was 7,500 people. And that's why I introduced my Complete Streets Act. The bill mandates that all new construction along dangerous roads must include complete streets elements like bicycle and pedestrian paths. Mr. Krassenstein, Detroit works hard to include complete street design elements in its road structure. Do you agree that we must prioritize complete streets at the federal level in order to make our roads safer?
Thank you, Senator, for your question, for your support on road safety and complete streets. Absolutely. I think that for any street design, having a context-appropriate complete street is critically important. That doesn't necessarily mean that the right solution is to put bike lanes on every single street, but to have the types of solutions that are appropriate for the road. So that could be looking at things to slow down traffic to allow pedestrians to cross safer. It could be using bike lanes in order to do traffic calming measures. Or it could just be like having painted crosswalks so that pedestrians can safely cross the street. I think there's a variety of types of countermeasures that can be used, but anything we can do to support complete streets and safer streets types actions on any new street, especially streets that receive federal funding, I think is extremely valuable.
Oh, excellent. Now I'd like to pivot to another important topic, autonomous vehicle safety. Automakers are increasingly including new software in vehicles that can assist drivers with accelerating, braking, and turning. Yet these driver assistance features are only designed for use under certain road conditions and with an alert driver behind the wheel. These features are especially dangerous when automakers give them misleading names that lull drivers into a false sense of security. The worst offender is, of course, Tesla, which has created an autopilot mode that at best should be called semi-pilot. Mr. Farah, in your view, do Tesla drivers generally understand that autopilot mode can only be operated on certain roads and requires active driver engagement, or do they get misled into thinking they can just push the button and they can go to sleep?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned in my opening statement as well as my written statement, I think that it's imperative that we distinguish between driver assist vehicles versus actual autonomous vehicles that are operating at level 4. In the latter, the human, insofar as there's a human in the vehicle, has no responsibility for the dynamic driving task. When you do have a driver assist feature, it is absolutely imperative that the driver understands what their obligations are. They need to be prepared to be able to take over at a moment's notice. Many people have had confusion that has led to a number of situations, and certainly appreciate the spirit of what you're getting at.
No, thank you. So that's why I've urged both the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Federal Trade Commission to investigate Tesla's misleading autopilot system and have directly demanded Tesla to stop using this dangerous branding. And I'd also like to discuss a critical safety issue with driver assistance features like Tesla's autopilot and full autonomous vehicles. These systems can only be safely operated under certain conditions and in certain locations, such as highways in sunny weather. In the autonomous vehicle industry, these conditions are known as the operational design domain, which identifies where and under what conditions a driving assistance feature like Tesla's autopilot or a true autonomous vehicle can safely operate. By contrast, these automated features or autonomous vehicles are specifically not designed to be operated in other road conditions, such as dangerous winding roads with cross traffic. So again, Mr. Farah, you represent many manufacturers who are testing full autonomous vehicles. Can those vehicles operate outside their operational driving domain?
Senator Markey, again, thank you for the question. The state of the industry, the state of the technology right now is that our members are operating at level 4. That does mean, as you said, that they are confined to an operational design domain. That is a set of safety limitations that are put on the vehicle, whether geographic or weather that you mentioned. Right now, those vehicles remain within the ODD. The ODD can be something like the city of San Francisco or the city of Phoenix and Scottsdale. It could be a stretch of highway for things like autonomous trucking, and that's where we are from a technology perspective, and we'll make sure that we continue to roll out the technology deliberately and safely.
Thank you. And should autonomous vehicles or vehicles with driver assistance features engaged be able to operate outside their operational design domain, Mr. Farah?
I cannot speak to the driver assistance features in terms of what it is, the state of the technology is there. I can only speak to level 4 technology where our members are now.
Well, again, my view is that there's absolutely no reason that driving features like Tesla's autopilot or full autonomous vehicles should be operating outside of their operational design domain. Thank you for this hearing, Mr. Chairman, and thank all the witnesses for their expert testimony.
Thank you, Senator Markey. Senator Lujan, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nelson, I want to start by thanking you for highlighting the importance of the HALT Act in your testimony. I was proud to work with a bipartisan coalition of colleagues, Senators Rick Scott, Shelley Moore Capito, and our chairman, Senator Gary Peters, who is also a champion for road safety, to get this landmark provision included in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Now, once implemented, based on statistics that we see across the country, as many as 10,000 lives a year could be saved by the inclusion of this technology. Over the past few years, I've been encouraged to see industry partners stand up and become part of the solution to get impaired driving technology in vehicles. In December of last year, General Motors CEO Mary Barra said that technology to passively detect alcohol in cars exists and that it's coming soon. At CES this year, Tier 1 automotive supplier Magna introduced their latest test car with new safety technology combining a number of interior sensing technologies to detect driver impairment. Mr. Nelson, since the President signed the HALT Act into law in 2021, how has the technology available on the market changed?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And before I respond to your question, I want to, on behalf of the safety community and especially victims and survivors, thank you and your colleagues for getting HALT over the finish line. Relative to your question about how technology has evolved since implementation of the IIJA, to your point, these technologies existed already before the IIJA became law, but certainly the HALT making it into that legislation has spurred innovation. There's no question that the technology to make this happen, whether it be just alcohol or the passive detection of alcohol plus vehicle monitoring are combined together, all of those options exist right now. OEMs are already working at ways to implement it, and NHTSA issuing its final rule is the only way we're going to make sure that we stop allowing 37 people to die on our roads in impaired driving crashes every day that it's delayed.
So let me ask you a follow-up to that pertaining to the rule. Why is it so important that NHTSA issue their notice of public rulemaking by November 15th, 2024?
Again, I think every day that we delay that rulemaking, we allow 37 people to die on our roads in impaired driving crashes. It's a life or death situation.
I appreciate that. And having have sat in many vehicles, including the test vehicles that MAGA was showing, who's one of the largest suppliers to GM, if I'm not mistaken, it was impressive to me to see what people have already developed and to positively learn the number of patents that have been filed by American auto manufacturers as well as American major suppliers is encouraging. That was one of the goals of this, was to encourage the market to respond to providing these solutions as well. So thank you very much for that as well. Now, Ms. Chase, I appreciate you highlighting the importance of another key technology in transportation safety. Yes or no, will future innovations in transportation safety rely on technology like broadband to keep drivers and vulnerable road users safe?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The answer is there's more than one way to communicate. So broadband is a key solution, but there's also dedicated spectrum for safety-critical collision avoidance V2X communications. There's also wireless communication options, and particularly with advances in 5G technology and others, there's many ways to communicate core safety information to road users. Broadband is a key backbone of our system, but it's not the only way to communicate.
Is broadband needed for wireless towers to work?
Broadband is needed for ubiquitous communication and infrastructure.
So I'm not trying to be cute here, but the way that I understand a tower that mobile phone providers depend on, there's fiber that goes to a tower, and then that tower has antennas, and it provides a canopy to cover things of that nature. So the hard wire to that tower, that's a necessity, correct?
So I can't speak to the exact specifications of what's needed for a tower.
Let me go on then. The reason I'm asking this question, let me ask the question in the way that you answered. If there's no connectivity in rural communities, is that going to prevent some of the benefits to accessing future roadway safety technologies? So if they don't have wireless, there's no broadband, there's no canopy in a rural community, do they get the benefit from the same technologies available in a big city that has robust connectivity with wireless providers or broadband canopies built by folks in the community?
So those technologies need to be prioritized in rural areas for sure, for more reasons just than transportation safety, of course, right? There's significant economic and other benefits that come from having that type of connectivity. Those solutions will enhance some of the more modern technological advances in transportation safety, but there are solutions, even right now. There's an example of a sensor and an AI-based solution being used on an Indian reservation in Yakama Nation who does not have robust connectivity, and they're able to then actually track and understand dangerous situations, near misses and such at an intersection using this contained solution that is not dependent on a broadband connection. So I would say to you, there are additional ways to bring those solutions to rural communities, but I agree with you that broadband connectivity and cellular connectivity, building that out in the future to all of our communities is important.
And Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree that whether it's LiDAR or other sensors, participating with some AI sensor capability in a hard drive is going to help a rural community. The problem I have is all the other bells and whistles that require internet access or wireless access. If there's not connectivity in a community, then they don't get that. And people living in rural communities deserve the same safety that's going to be in a vehicle in the biggest cities in America. That's the point that I was trying to make. And Mr. Chairman, if you'd indulge me quickly, is it Mr. Farah, Jeff? Farah? Because of the question that Mr. Markey was asking with the level 3 vehicles, which if I'm correct with these things, when they're When it's a level 3, it'll alert you if your hands aren't on the steering wheel at a certain state or something, like you have to touch it, or like even with a Tesla, it says, okay, your session is turned off. You have to use your hands the whole time until you turn off the car, park it, and all the rest. Is that correct?
Senator, yes, we refer to that as conditional automation.
So is it legal or illegal for someone to buy a weight and strap it to a steering wheel in a level 3 vehicle and let the thing drive itself?
Senator, I don't know the exact law. We don't represent manufacturers that do that. We're a level 4, level 5 organization.
So you don't represent all self-driving platforms of vehicles, only level 4, level 5?
We represent truly autonomous vehicle
I
companies at
appreciate
level
that.
4 and level
I'll
5.
save my question for someone else, Gary, or sorry, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is, it's my understanding now for folks that have level 3 cars that there's manufacturers that sell gizmos that hook onto a steering wheel. There's some people nodding yes here. I'm not saying that they've done it, but you attach this thing to the steering wheel, and then the steering wheel thinks that your hand's on it. I don't know if that's good or bad. Someone found a loophole, and so they're selling these things. It's just something that the smart people should take a look at, is all that I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, Senator Lujan. And I want to thank each of our witnesses. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to provide testimony and help us work through these issues. The hearing record will remain open for 4 weeks. Any senators who wish to submit questions or statements for the hearing record should do so within 2 weeks by June 4th. Witnesses will then have 2 weeks or until June 18th to respond to the committee questions. This hearing is now adjourned.